Welcome to this Notre Dame Signing Day special defensive edition. We already did the offensive video, so please go check that out if that's something you're interested in. I'll make sure I link it. I'll make sure it's easy for you guys to access. But had a lot of fun doing that. Had even more fun doing the defensive side of the ball. I think that this Notre Dame class is pretty loaded on both sides. I think there's a lot of talent on the defensive side that we're going to talk about right now. Also threw in Teddy Jarrard at the end because he wasn't in this class of 26 when we did the offensive video, so he's part of this video as well. But I really appreciate you guys for watching. Please let me know what you think about these football players. Again, these are my opinions. Some of it's from 24/7, but at the end of the day, most of this stuff is my opinion. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to disagree. I encourage you to disagree. I really like hearing Notre Dame fans' opinion on whoever, player that if you think I'm underrating somebody, overrating somebody, please reach out. But thanks for watching. Enjoy the video. Rodney Dunham is the highest rated player that the Irish signed on either side of the ball. He is a 6'4", 230-pound, five-star edge rusher who went to Myers Park in North Carolina. To me, the reason that Rodney Dunham is a five-star edge rusher, one of the most heralded prospects in this 2026 class across the entire country, is the flexibility and the explosiveness that he has in the frame that he has. I'm telling you right now, you guys see how many recruiting videos I make, how many recruits we talk about on this channel. There are other guys out there that have as good a first step as Rodney Dunham, that are as explosive as Rodney Dunham, that are as flexible as Rodney Dunham. The thing is that those other guys that may test athletically similar to Rodney Dunham, they are not 6'4", 230. Those other guys that are close athletically to Rodney Dunham, there is a lot more physical and a lot more strength development that has to go on before they see the field at the next level. That is not the case at all with Rodney Dunham. This guy is already pretty filled out for a high school prospect. Of course, he's going to have to put on more weight, get stronger to see the field at the next level, but he is a lot closer, a lot further ahead of the curve compared to other guys that move as similar as him. But yeah, talking about those athletic traits that Rodney Dunham has, very explosive athlete. You see that first step right there. It's not just the snap timing. He does do a pretty good job of that, but the quick twitch muscles that he has are as good as you'll find in this 26 class. And I'm also blown away as to how flexible Rodney Dunham is. When I first turned on the film, when I saw how explosive he was, take a look at that play right there. When you see 6'4", 230 on the 24/7 page, you're kind of expecting to turn on a film of a guy that's a lot more stiff, a guy that might kind of struggle to get around the corner. Not the case at all with Rodney Dunham. Time and time again, this entire highlight tape, you're just going to see how easy he can get around the corner there. But he has all the physical gifts that you look for in a guy that has the upside to turn into an elite pass rusher. At the next level, it's just kind of about developing a plan around all those physical gifts from God that Rodney Dunham has. But I'll tell you right now, I'm not sure that you'll find another guy as flexible or as explosive in Rodney Dunham, and a guy that's also 6'4", 230 pounds. So yeah, a lot of upside as a pass rusher, no doubt about that, especially as a run defender as well. Very powerful football player. That's going to really allow him to set the edge consistently at 6'4", 230. You really like that frame to do that. Again, like I'm saying before, there's other guys that are going to come off the edge a lot faster. The thing is, those guys are a lot closer to 6'1", 6'2", probably guys that you only see on the field in pass rush situations. I think Rodney Dunham not only has the upside to turn into a really good run defender down the line, I think you'll be getting something as a run defender pretty early in his college football career. But yeah, talking about the hands as well, I think that's the one area for improvement. I think he does a really good job with the violence in the hands. You can see how aggressive he is with those hands. It's just kind of on the Notre Dame coaching staff to kind of hone that violence. It's just raw power, raw aggression right now. It's on the Notre Dame coaching staff to kind of turn that into a pass rush plan, in my opinion. But yeah, there's a reason that this guy's a 5-star. There's a reason that this guy's one of the highest rated players on 24/7. I think that you'll see him make an impact sooner rather than later. The other edge rusher that Notre Dame signed is Ebenezer Ewatade, 6'3.5", 220, went to South Gardner in North Carolina. So with Rodney Dunham, I talked about how rare it was to have a guy that filled out already at high school also move the way that he does. Ebenezer Ewatade is a guy that is much further behind on the physical development standpoint. You could just take a look at him compared to Rodney Dunham. There's a lot more weight, a lot more strength that has to be put on. The reason that this guy was such a heralded football prospect is because of the upside of what he can become. He's listed at 6'3.5", so he's pretty long, but when you consider the fact that he has 35-inch arms, which would be something in the 95th percentile, I'd say off the top of my head, compared to NFL edge rushers, guys that go into the NFL combine, he's got very rare length and a very rare first step. He is so twitched up. You see how fast he gets off the edge, does a really good job turning the corner as well. Just a lot more physical development that has to go on. So with Rodney Dunham, that's a guy that's going to see the field very early in his college football career, I think on all kinds of downs. I think Ewatade is a guy that has a lot of upside as a run defender. Don't get me wrong. That's probably just a year, maybe even 2 years away from coming into fruition because there is a lot more weight that has to be put on. I know that they're listed at similar weights, but I think that, Rodney Dunham is much more filled out. Ewatade is a guy that's going to have to put on a lot of weight and a lot of strength. But yeah, a lot of upside as a pass rusher. I mean, a lot of upside as a pass rusher. Again, because of those three traits that you look for. Length, Ewatade has that in spades. He's listed as 35-inch arms. First step for sure. This is a guy that, if they did the vertical, if they do the broad at Notre Dame, if they had that combine before they enroll at college, I think this guy would jump out of the building. And the flexibility as well. He turns the corner pretty easily as well. So the game with Ewatade is just a bit more about having him put on weight and having him turn into a more of an every down player down the road. I just think that's a bit further down the road. But year one, I do think this is a guy that you get onto the football field on those pass rushing downs only. Let him get after the quarterback in different kinds of packages. But yeah, short-term impact pass rusher. I think a lot of upside long-term as well. We'll now move to the interior defensive line, and we'll get started with Elijah Golden, a 6'4", 275-pound defensive lineman who went to Cardinal Mooney in Florida. This is a guy with a lot of physical and a lot of athletic upside. At 6'4", he is a very long defensive tackle. I think he's very wide as well. We can see that on the screen right now. Pretty wide football player, pretty strong as well. Really like what he has physically. Think he's a really good athlete as well. We'll see him not always time the snap great, but when he does time the snap great, he does have a really good get off. He's really agile as well. We'll see that he has the athletic ability to make plays on the perimeter pretty consistently. I think he carries 275 pounds very well. So really like what he has physically and athletically. To me, Elijah Golden is a guy that's best football is still ahead of him. He has not played his best football yet. And the reason that I say that is he plays with a pretty high pad level consistently. We'll see the way that he comes out of his stance. He'll just kind of shoot up, and it kind of does not allow him to generate as much power as he would otherwise. And to me, it's a consistency thing. The reason that I say that is you will see him get low every now and then. You will see him on these pass rushes kind of turn the corner. He is a flexible football player, so I just think it's something that will have to be improved at the next level. But the good thing, it's just a consistency thing. At the end of the day, it's like, what do you pay defensive line coaches for? This is what you pay them for. What you're getting physically and what you're getting athletically in Elijah Golden. It's a big ball of clay. It's just kind of on the Notre Dame coaching staff to kind of form that ball of clay. Also really think that the hands could be improved at the next level. We'll see a lot of these sacks that he has. He had 21 in the last 2 years of his high school football career, 21 sacks total. A lot of them just come from him overwhelming the opposing offensive lineman with pure strength or pure size alone. That's not going to fly at the next level. There's a big jump from 2A football all the way to the schedule that Notre Dame plays. They're going to be facing a lot stronger, a lot faster offensive linemen. I think also the hands have to start getting developed. You're going to use that size for sure. You're going to use that athleticism, but also the hand technique as well, the hand placement. Like I said, at the end of the day, you're paying these defensive line coaches six-figure salaries or whatever they're getting paid. This is what you pay them for, to develop these kind of football players. I'll say develop these kind of athletes into football players. But yeah, Elijah Golden, a lot of upside, just has to be refined just a little bit. But really excited to see how he develops over the next 4 or 5 years. The other interior defensive lineman that Notre Dame signed is Tiki Ola, 6'2", 285, went to Bastrop in Texas. This is a guy that does have an understanding of leverage. He does a really good job playing with a low pad level consistently. It's a lot easier at 6'2" because you have a natural low center of gravity, but watch how he can just use that leverage advantage and turn that into power and become a real disruptor against the run. We'll see that this entire highlight tape. He's a very wide football player as well. And of course at 6'2", it's a lot easier compared to the last guy that we watched, Golden, who's 6'4". It's a lot easier to play with that low pad level consistently. I really like the way that Ola already has that coming into college, already has that understanding. And, yeah, there is a conversation to be had that at 6'4", the upside's a bit higher because you can, if you get that pad level right, there is a lot of upside. But I think with Ola, a guy that's already does use that to his advantage, I think the floor is a bit higher just because you're going to get a guy that will be pretty consistent against the run as long as he keeps putting on weight. I think this is a guy that's going to be a lot closer to 310, maybe even 320 when it's all said and done, just based on what you're going to ask him to do at the next level. I think you're getting a lot more pass rushing upside with Golden, but I think Ola, this is another guy that just depends on how his body responds. Maybe this is a guy that gets real twitched up in the next couple years, but I'd be willing to bet that you're going to ask him to do a lot more against the run than you will against the pass just because of that low pad level and the leverage that he plays with. Now talking about the linebackers, we're talking about Thomas Davis Jr., 6'2", 205, went to Weddington in North Carolina. This is the son of Thomas Davis Sr., naturally, who played a long time for the Carolina Panthers. And I really like the way Notre Dame kind of prioritizes these guys with NFL backgrounds or NFL lineages. We saw it last recruiting cycle, this recruiting cycle as well on the other side of the ball. Devin Fitzgerald, other guys that I'm not naming as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it kind of follows that this dude's dad played in the NFL for a long time. I think I said this about Devin Fitzgerald as well. Not just the athlete that he was, but kind of the understanding of how to run routes, how smooth the route running was. It's kind of the same thing with Thomas Davis Jr. You see just how fast the reads happen, the way that he just kind of trusts his instincts, the way that he comes downhill and lights up the opposing offensive player that he's tackling. I mean, with a lot of linebackers, especially, this is a position that is very important to read. You can't get away with just being a good athlete at linebacker. At some point, you have to start developing the instincts. There's a lot of guys that get recruited every recruiting cycle because of the athletic upside or the physical upside. And then you kind of treat the instincts and the reading as something that's going to get developed. I think Thomas Davis Jr. is a guy that's coming into college with a very instinctual playing style already. Just the way that he comes downhill, the way that he crashes downhill, the way that he trusts his instincts. Good athlete as well. I think he's got good sideline to sideline speed. 6'2", 205. This dude's going to put on a lot of weight. I'm telling you right now. You're going to take a look at a picture of him right now, and then in 2 years, and he's going to look like a completely new human being. His dad played at 6'1", 235. I just checked. If that was at the NFL, I do think that you'll see Thomas Davis Jr. put on a whole lot of weight at the college level as well. But yeah, excited to see what he becomes. The next linebacker we'll talk about is Jacoby Clapper, 6'1.5", 215, went to St. Xavier in Ohio. Guy that had a really productive high school football career. Also a guy that we'll see lined up across the entire defense. We'll see him lined up as an off-ball linebacker. We'll see him lined up as on the line of scrimmage as an edge rusher. We'll even kind of see him lined up as an apex, almost as a nickel defender. So a lot of experience getting after the quarterback, reading run, and even as a pass dropper. So a guy that's done a whole lot at the high school level. What does he do best? That's kind of depends on how his body grows, I think. The way that his body responds to first, growing, and then Notre Dame strength and conditioning program, I think that'll kind of depend on what he does, or that'll determine what he does at the next level. I do think there should be a conversation about using this guy situationally as a pass rusher, because to me, the best trait that he has is the closing speed. We'll see him as an off-ball linebacker, also the way that he can just kind of read run and then pulls that trigger and comes downhill in a real flash. I mean, right there, whole lot of ground that he covered on that one, but we see that kind of show up as an edge rusher as well, not necessarily on this clip right now, but the way that he can kind of get off of the line of scrimmage and get into the backfield. Also very flexible as a pass dropper. I think with a lot of the other players that we've talked about so far, it's kind of easy to tell what they'll do at the next level. With Jacoby Clapper, a lot more growth to kind of happen physically, and I think that'll kind of give us some more answers about what Notre Dame thinks of him. Or, I'm not even sure if Notre Dame staff knows yet. Good football player, just not sure exactly what he'll do. Curious to hear other people's opinions, but you can see right here, pretty good pass rusher. The other five-star that Notre Dame signed on the defensive side of the ball is Joey O'Brien, 6'3", 185, went to LaSalle College in Pennsylvania. We'll see him on both sides of the ball in high school. I do think this is a guy that some schools probably thought was a wide receiver at the next level. Notre Dame thinks his upside is higher as a defensive back, and now defensive back is a very broad term. That encompasses 4 or 5 positions. You figure 2 safeties and then 2 corners, either a guy that's going to line up close to the line of scrimmage as a nickelback or maybe on the boundary as a boundary corner. Well, what do you think Joey O'Brien does? I'm curious to hear other people's opinions. My 2 cents, I think this guy's upside's higher as a free safety. I really like the range that we see Joey O'Brien have. We won't see it quite as much on the defensive side of the ball because he's lined up a lot closer to the line of scrimmage. But on the offensive side of the ball as a wide receiver, we can see the long speed that he has. The dude is very fast in a straight line. There's no doubt about that. Then at 6'3", I really love how long of a football player he is. Also a guy that played basketball in high school, so I really like the vertical that he has as well. I just kind of picture him as a single high free safety, a guy that can range the entire football field, a guy that you just let him read the quarterback's eyes and let him make a play from one hash all the way to the opposite sideline. No doubt that he can do that. And then also has that quick trigger to kind of put himself into the box if he does read run. Now, there are people that think he's going to be a nickelback at the next level, maybe a bit more of a box safety. And I understand the intrigue with that, a very long football player. You kind of like the length to play man coverage, to kind of match up with those longer tight ends, the guys that are a bit closer to 6'5", guys that are real matchup problems. Joey O'Brien kind of would be the answer to that. So I do understand why that is a conversation that people kind of want put Joey O'Brien in. But me personally, I just think he's such a rare athlete at 6'3", 185. I really like thinking about this guy just playing that single high position. I also think Dallas Golden's kind of the future of that nickelback position at Notre Dame. Really excited to see what he turns into, a guy that they signed in the 25 cycle. If you follow my channel for the past 2 years, one of my favorite football players to come out of high school in a while. But Joey O'Brien, very physical football player as well. We'll see that right now. Really like the way that he sticks his face into the grill here, the way that he just gets after it as a run defender. At 185 pounds, if you are going to play him closer to the line of scrimmage, that is kind of not a point of concern, but a point of development. Going to have to put on more weight, where if you do keep him at that single high, at that free safety, you don't really have to be so as much concerned about him adding more weight. But he certainly has the room to add it. I think you take a look at him right now. He's a very long football player, a lot of room to continue to add weight and muscle too. I think that what he ends up doing at the next level kind of depend on, first, how his body kind of develops, but also what Notre Dame feels that they're kind of short at. If Dallas Golden doesn't develop as well as I think he will, then I kind of understand, kind of feeling the need to put this guy at nickelback long term. But you also might see him in a variety of positions. I have no doubt that he has the ability to do that because of how rare of a physical and an athletic specimen he is. We probably won't just see him in one thing. I think this is a dude that could do a whole lot of different things very well. But yeah, I'm curious to hear Notre Dame fans' opinions, because I do think that there's a lot of opinions that have merit. I'm not saying that mine has more merit. That's just kind of my thinking. Going to be interested to follow the spring camp developments with Notre Dame, leading up to the spring game and kind of seeing what he's getting more work at. But I think that'll give us a bit of a better idea of what he's going to do. But good football player, there's no doubt this dude's going to do something well at the next level. I think what he does exactly is just kind of up for debate right now. I first watched Khary Abrams this offseason before the 2025 football season. It's one of those guys that's just stuck in my head. I think he is one of my favorite D-backs in this 26 cycle. Might be my favorite. I'm not going to say that yet. I'll think about it a little bit more. But I'm such a big fan of Khary Abrams, and the reason is what we see on the screen right now. He's listed at 6'2". Okay, there's other 6'2 cornerbacks. There's not that many other 6'2 cornerbacks that are as fluid as Khary Abrams. I really love how fluid the hips are, how flexible of a football player he is. I think that when you have a corner that's 6'2", that's 6'3", he's long enough to match up with those very tall wide receivers that we see across the country. He's not going to get outmatched physically by those guys. At the same time, that fluidity is going to allow him to change direction and really stay in pace with those twitched up 5'10" type wide receivers that we see across the country. The smaller guys that are freak athletes as well. I think Khary Abrams has that length to match up with the longer guys and that fluidity to match up with the smaller guys. Leonard Moore is another guy that, I think he's listed at 6'3" for Notre Dame right now. Guy that is going to be one of the first defensive players selected in 2027. Another guy that's a freak athlete. But I love what we see on this one right here, how patient Khary Abrams is. I really like what we see in the man-to-man coverage on the high school tape. That's what Notre Dame does a lot. They play zone as well, but a lot of man coverage. I think that Khary Abrams has a lot of upside as a man corner because of that length and that fluidity. Something as well, I got the track number right here, and I know it's good. I think it's 10.74, a really good 100-meter time. So fast in a straight line. That's going to help him in the zone coverage where you kind of have to pull that trigger and get downhill. We'll see that on this highlight tape as well. Very physical defender. I think everything that you look for in a bona fide cornerback prospect. And I know you might be like, oh, King Cold, why is this dude listed as a 4-star then if he's so good? He's on the cusp of being a 5-star. I think 24/7 had him listed in the top 40. He's listed at 49. He is a 5-star on the composite rating, though. So very excited about Khary Abrams. I think that Notre Dame's really stacked up in the cornerback room. You probably won't see him much in 2025 or 2026, that is, but I think that's a good thing. Just let him get that man technique down. Let him understand the zone coverage responsibilities and all that kind of stuff. And then, I do think this is a guy that's going to be a bona fide shutdown, lockdown, whatever you want to say, cornerback down the line. Really excited about Khary Abrams. Personal favorite, channel favorite. Aiden Pouncey's another guy that's on the cusp of being rated as a 5-star. He's a 6'2.5", 160-pound defensive back. that went to Winter Park in Florida. Another guy that's just an all-around great athlete. I think with Aiden Pouncey specifically, it's really the explosiveness. I mean, we see him on the offensive side of the ball, the way those first 5 yards happen, the way that he can just be standing still and then just pulls that trigger to get upfield on the offensive side of the ball. That kind of translates to that zone coverage that we were talking about with Khary Abrams. Abrams, another guy that's explosive to me. His highest upside is as a man-to-man defender. I think Aiden Pouncey is a guy that we'll be talking about playing a lot more zone coverage. I really like the range as well. You know, we talked a lot about that with Joey O'Brien, how that length kind of helps him be a very rangy defender. Aiden Pouncey is a guy that's already developed as a ball hawk. You can take a look at the way that he just kind of reads the quarterback's eyes and then has that explosiveness to get there, or the explosiveness to start to get there, and then that long speed to actually get there, and then the ball skills at the catch point to high point the ball. This guy that had 7 interceptions his last season at Winter Park. So a guy that has a lot of on-ball production. I think with Aiden Pouncey, we're going to talk a lot more about. I feel good about this guy being a bit further away from the line of scrimmage, kind of as a single high, maybe a split safety. The one thing with Aiden Pouncey, you know, at 160 pounds, there's a lot more weight room stuff to go on. But, yeah, you could say that about every football player. I mean, you guys watched this entire video. I think I've brought that up with most football players. That's how it is with most recruits. But I think Aiden Pouncey specifically, a bit more work to kind of go on in that regard. The good news is that there is a lot of physicality. You know, this dude, we'll see him as a run defender. I'm not sure if we'll have time to see that right now, but is a guy that's very physical as a run defender. So, you know, that's not a long-term concern, just something that is going to have to happen before he sees the field at the next level. But in the meantime, just a great athlete, great football player already. You know, I don't want to downplay the zone instincts. You can see this dude's a real ball hawk, really understands how to read the quarterback's eyes, and then not only turns that into a takeaway, but into 6 points like we saw on that play last time. The next D-back we're talking about is Chaston Smith, 6'1", 175, went to Knoxville Catholic in Tennessee. The Knoxville Catholic Fighting Irish. They're also a team that wears green and gold and navy, and also the Fighting Irish. So it won't be too much of a culture shock for Smith moving into South Bend. He's already used to that navy and that gold and that green everywhere. But yeah, we'll see him in a lot of off coverage, so we'll see him in off man right now. I really like the patience that we see on this play right here. I think the hips are pretty fluid. 6'1", you know, he's a bit longer than most corners that we'll talk about. But I think that on this highlight tape, what I really noticed about Chaston Smith was the adeptness or the understanding in zone coverage. Does a really good job reading the quarterback's eyes and then finding the ball from there. We'll see in a little bit, or maybe we won't get to it, but he'll just be floating to his left a little bit because the wide receiver's taking him there, but then he takes a look at the quarterback. Quarterback's going to bring you to the football. He looks down to the right, and he's going to make a really nice break on the ball. So I think he's a very fluid athlete as well. Very physical. I don't know if we'll see any man coverage or any tackling on this, but at the catch point does a really good job just kind of attacking that wide receiver and kind of knocking these balls incomplete. So I think he does a good job at the catch point. Specifically, notice a lot of zone coverage on the highlight tape. And the last defensive player we'll talk about today is Nick Reddish, 5'11", 185, went to Independence in North Carolina. Kind of a tough evaluation, not going to lie. We're going to see him a lot closer to the line of scrimmage than I think we will at the next level. I think this is another one of those guys. You know, if you kind of notice a common theme with some of these lower-rated recruits, you just recruit the guys that have maybe 1 or 2 good skills, and then you start filling them out. You know, I think that a lot of what they do depends on the way their body continues to grow, and that's kind of the case with Nick Reddish. But I think you see a guy with really good zone instincts. I think we saw that on that first play there, the way that he just, you know, reacts to the quarterback eyes. We talked a lot about that with Smith, the guy that we just talked about. But Nick Reddish, you know, the cards are kind of stacked against him, being 5'11", 185. It's just about developing that speed and that strength around that. I do think this is a guy with kind of a special team skill set, another guy that's really physical. I think that I've said that about every single football player that we watch for Notre Dame right now. And you know, if that's not something that we do with every school. You know, there's some schools that you'll watch, it's just purely about athleticism and then turning those football players into physical football players down the road. I think with everybody that we watch for Notre Dame, that has not been an issue. And you know, there's a reason behind that. That's not pure luck. You know, Notre Dame does prioritize those guys that are already physical, which, you know, it's one of those things is you either have it or don't. You're either going to get after it or you're not. I think everybody that we've watched today feel good about the physicality. And we're also going to talk about the quarterback Teddy Jarrard in this video. I know that this is a defensive video, but I made the offensive one about a month ago, and Teddy Jarrard, who was committed to Notre Dame since this offseason, ended up reclassing to the class of 2026. So I just wanted to include him in this just so we can be complete with this entire recruiting class. And he has not signed with Notre Dame yet. Just want to be very clear, this guy's still a commitment, hasn't signed the dotted line, but there's no smoke about him flipping or anything like that. But we'll talk about Teddy Jarrard now. Guy that's a 6'3", 185-pound quarterback. Like I said, a guy that reclassed, so a guy that should still be in high school when he walks into South Bend next season. But we first watched his film when he committed to Notre Dame this offseason, and I got really blown away by the tangible aspects of his game. He's a very big quarterback at 6'3". A good athlete. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Really easy arm downfield. That's what I noticed on the sophomore film. Now, watching this film now, which ended up being the senior season, really blown away how fast he goes through his progressions. You do not see that on high school highlight tapes. We don't even see that with a lot of college quarterbacks, to be completely frank. But you'll just kind of see him fly through his progressions, and then also the anticipation that he throws with downfield. A lot of these throws come out of his hand while that wide receiver's still not open. By the time the ball gets there, the receiver's open, but Teddy Jarrard gets the ball out sooner than that. So really like the anticipation that he throws with for a high school quarterback. I think you see that pretty consistently on these downfield throws. And of course, it's hard to say that a quarterback's inconsistent when you're just watching a high school highlight tape. But I think all these throws, a lot of high school quarterbacks, the top guys even, you'll just kind of see them. It'll just be an unrealistic throw, one that you won't see at the next level. I think a lot of this kind of stuff does translate, how fast he goes through his progressions. Not a guy that's going to have that big of a learning curve to see the field at the next level, despite him reclassing, in my opinion. But we'll move on to some of the athletic stuff right now, because he is a good athlete as well. See that right now. Just kind of him breaking the pocket, kind of like the way he changes up his arm angles, looking downfield. Good enough athlete for sure. 6'3", 185. A lot more weight to be put on. Definitely feel good about that. But at the same time, I don't think there's any pressure for this guy to see the field anytime soon. Not only because CJ Carr's that's CJ Carr's job. That's not even up for debate. But there's also another quarterback in this 26 class, Grubbs, that we talked about last time. So no real rush to push Teddy Jarrard ahead of schedule. Now, interesting conversation. Kenny Minchey's transferring. I do think Notre Dame's going to be kind of aggressive getting a transfer portal quarterback. Maybe a guy that, God forbid if CJ Carr goes down, you feel a bit better about him coming in, because Kenny Minchey's about as good as a backup quarterback as you'll find. That's something that does not happen anymore in the transfer portal age. But, kind of interesting that Notre Dame's taking two quarterbacks in this 26 class. It's unconventional, but it's unconventional times at the same time. So you kind of understand it. And you're taking a look at Notre Dame's quarterback depth chart, quantity-wise, it's kind of lacking. Not quality-wise, really feel good about CJ Carr. Hebert, the guy they brought in last year from Delaware, we watched him. Like his upside long-term as well. And the two guys that they brought in this 26 cycle as well, guys with long-term upside. I just think you kind of want a stopgap just in case CJ Carr gets hurt. But yeah, interested to hear Notre Dame fans' opinions on that. So that was every Notre Dame defensive signee. We did the offensive version of this about a month ago. Please go check that out if you're interested in that. But I'll talk about the guys that we just talked about, and I'll get started with the guy with the biggest day one impact. I'm going to say Rodney Dunham. I think his frame is so far along, and it's also kind of easy to get these edge rushers in situationally. You don't have to do everything great year one to see the field as an edge rusher, and Rodney Dunham's a guy that also has that long-term upside. Sure, definitely feel good about him developing throughout his time in South Bend, but I also think day one it's going to be kind of easy to get him onto the football field. The guy with the highest long-term upside, I'm going to say Khary Abrams. I'm pretty biased. That's a guy that I started liking this offseason, and just watching the senior year film now just kind of confirmed my original bias towards him. Why am I biased? Long and fluid. Like I said, that's just kind of my type. If you keep watching my videos, if you watch them through a couple of years, you're going to say, I can tell why you like this guy. It's the same kind of guy every time. But I feel good about Khary Abrams' long-term upside. Like I said, Notre Dame stacked at that cornerback position. You don't have to put him ahead of schedule. You can kind of slow down his development. And I really like the fact that, Leonard Moore is already there. He's going to be there, similar type player. I think I said Leonard Moore's 6'3", but he's 6'2". Similar player, what they have physically. I think that'll be a nice kind of guy to be there to kind of learn from, So, if Khary Abrams is a sponge and walks in as a sponge, there's a lot there to absorb because there's some pretty talent in that cornerback room. And the diamond in the rough, the guy that I think is going to develop the most throughout his time in South Bend, or maybe has the highest upside, I'm going to go ahead and say Ebenezer Iwatade. I almost picked somebody else because I know I'm botching his name, and I kind of feel bad, but there's not that much audio information out there about how you actually pronounce his name. But yeah, when I tell you that this dude has a lot of upside as a pass rusher, I want to put like 5 exclamation points on it, and he might not even reach it at Notre Dame. I'm telling you right now, he is very skinny right now, but that flexibility, that first step especially, and then the length, if he actually has 35-inch arms like 24/7 says he does, like I said, that's like, I said 95 percentile, that might even be 99 percentile, but he might not even put it all together at South Bend, but if he does, I do think that this is a guy that has a lot of upside as a pass rusher, and honestly, he might even get drafted on that upside alone, but yeah, we'll see. Really excited about him as well. But yeah, at this point, we've talked about every single Notre Dame signee. I really appreciate you guys watching this video. I think that the first one I did was one of my most watched videos of all time. So I really appreciate that because these are, I'm going to tell you right now, these kind of kick my ass. I can't really do more than one a day without a serious toll on my body and my mind. But they're a lot of fun to make. There's a reason I do it. I really appreciate you guys for watching this. We are going to kind of transition into more of a draft channel after the national championship, so you won't really hear me talk that much about Notre Dame football until after the NFL draft. But this offseason, we'll make sure we do more recruiting. I kind of want to start a series where we do maybe a bi-weekly thing for every team where, we talk about the recruiting developments and then maybe the guys on roster, how they're developing. Because it's a lot of fun to watch these guys and talk about their upside. It's even more fun to kind of see that come into real life. A guy like Boubacar Traore, like a guy that was very high on this like last offseason, you kind of saw the flashes, and then I really think he's been putting it all together. I kind of want to start a series like that. So yeah, really appreciate you guys for watching this entire draft cycle, this entire recruiting cycle, that is. I mean, we started talking about Notre Dame recruits pretty early. I think we've been all over Javion Osborne for a while now. It's a lot of fun to do, but I appreciate you guys for watching, and thanks for watching. Go Irish. I'm not a Notre Dame fan, but go Irish.